Maradona.
Maradona's son.
Oh, the Maradona.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the President's party.
Ring out wild bells to the wild sky. Ring out the old, ring in the new, ring out the false, ring in the true. O God, eternal spirit of all life, on this very special day, the 121st commencement of Stanford University, may we stop living from one minute to the next. May we step back from worries and cares, from tasks and duties, from the ordinary pressures of life, and may we here and now take a larger view of life. We celebrate the personal growth and transformation that lie behind us, behind those who will graduate today, but also behind the rest of us as parents and relatives, as friends and mentors, as professors and staff and other members of the Stanford community. Before us lies the future, one of great hopes and dreams, but a future unseen and untested. As we commence life anew, may we, in the words of the poet, wring out false pride in place and blood, the civic slander and the spite. Ring in the love of truth and right. Ring in the common love of good. Ring out the old shapes of foul disease. Ring out the narrowing lust of gold. Ring out the 1,000 wars of old. Ring in the 1,000 years of peace. May our education free us from repeating the mistakes of the past, personal and collective. May our acquired knowledge and our ever-evolving understanding guide us so that the things that matter most are not at the mercy of the things that matter least. And may we act wisely and generously so that in the end it cannot be said that our lives were lived in vain. Amen.
Please be seated. Graduating students, faculty colleagues, former and current trustees, government officials, distinguished guests, family members, and friends, I warmly welcome all of you to the 121st commencement exercises of Stanford University. And I would like to start this morning by wishing all of the fathers here today a happy Father's Day. A special welcome to the seniors and graduate students of Stanford's various schools. Today, we shall award 1,763 bachelor's degrees, 2,302 master's degrees, and 1,023 doctoral degrees. The undergraduate class of 12 includes 307 seniors graduating with departmental honors, 279 graduating with university distinction, 102 students who have satisfied the requirements of more than one major, and 34 with dual bachelor's degrees. 124 are graduating with both a bachelor's and a master's degree, and 355 students have completed minors. Throughout its history, Stanford has attracted students from around the world. This year, 113 members of the undergraduate class are from 50 countries outside the United States. And there are 1,066 awardees of master's and PhD degrees representing 70 different countries. Now, you may notice that I started out this morning with a group of statistics. But before you jump to the conclusion that I do this because I am a computer scientist, let me say that reciting these statistics is a long tradition at our commencement ceremonies, and one that I am proud to carry on. Of course, this balancing of old and new, the innovative and the traditional, is a challenge that universities have faced for hundreds of years. Universities are prized for their traditions and are often the primary home for discussions and debates about the ancient and timeless questions facing humanity. At the same time, universities must look forward. They must be bold as they contemplate the future and their opportunities. This need to renew and reinvent the university while building on a firm and lasting foundation has been a theme in the speeches of many of my predecessors. Indeed, our first president, David Starr Jordan, in his inaugural address in 1891, reflected on this balance when he said, "It is for us, as teachers and students in the university's first year, to lay the foundations of a school which may last as long as human civilization. It is hallowed by no traditions, it is hampered by none. Its fingerposts all point forward." Today, 121 years later, we have established some wonderful traditions. But we have not forgotten President Jordan's exhortation. We remain mindful of the need to reinvent and move forward. As you leave Stanford, I hope you carry a deep appreciation of the values and traditions that are everlasting, as well as a willingness to be bold and to approach challenges with a fresh perspective. It is with the recognition that traditions remain vibrant when they are enthusiastically embraced by succeeding generations that I now invoke a very special Stanford commencement tradition. Graduating students, in the stands behind you are many who have made your Stanford years possible. Parents and grandparents, spouses and children, siblings, aunts and uncles, mentors and friends. Whoever played a role in helping you get to Stanford or in supporting and encouraging you once you were here, I invite you to please rise, turn to the stands, and join me in saying thank you. Thank you. Please be seated, and could I ask the provost to come forward to present the winners of the university awards?
It is my pleasure and privilege to present the Walter J. Gores Awards for Excellence in Teaching. Recommendation for these prizes and for the Lloyd W. Dinkelspiel Awards and the Kenneth M. Cuthbertson Awards were considered by a committee of faculty, students, and staff. I would like to ask the Gores Award winners to come to the stage at this time. The Gores Awards were established by a bequest from Walter J. Gores, a Stanford alumnus of the class of 1917. Gores was a dedicated teacher who strove for excellence during his 30 years as a distinguished professor at the University of Michigan. The Gores Awards recognize excellent teaching at the undergraduate and graduate level as defined in its broadest sense, to include lecturing, discussions, tutoring, advising, and course development. Teaching is a complex art and an essential cornerstone of university life. I will call each recipient forward to receive his or her award, and I ask that you hold your applause until I've announced all of this year's winners. The recipients of the 2012 Walter J. Gores Awards for Excellence in Teaching are Stephen Haber, the A.A. and Jean Welch Milligan Professor of Political Science, and the Peter and Helen Bing Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution. George Hilley, Associate Professor of Geological and Environmental Sciences. Luke C.D. Stein, PhD candidate in economics. On behalf of the university, I congratulate each of you for this recognition of excellence in your teaching. I would like to ask the Dinkelspiel Award winners to come to the stage at this time. Lloyd Dinkelspiel's service to Stanford included the presidency of the Board of Trustees in the 1950s and was characterized by an enduring concern for the quality of undergraduate education at this university. Shortly after he died in 1959, a memorial fund was established to endow the Lloyd W. Dinkelspiel Awards for distinctive contributions to undergraduate education. I will call each recipient forward to receive his or her award, and I ask that you hold your applause until I've announced all of this year's winners. The recipients of the 2012 Lloyd W. Dinkelspiel Awards for distinctive contributions to undergraduate education are Carol Boggs, Bing Director of the Program in Human Biology and Professor teaching Biology; Bridget Martin Hard, Course Coordinator for Introductory Psychology; Otis Reed, undergraduate student in Public Policy and Economics; Michael Tubbs, undergraduate student in Comparative Studies in Race and Ethnicity and master's candidate in Policy, Organization, and Leadership Studies. On behalf of the university, I congratulate each of you for this significant recognition of your contributions to undergraduate education. The Gores and Dinkelspiel Awards are joined by a third, the Kenneth M. Cuthbertson Award for Exceptional Service to Stanford University. I would like to ask the Cuthbertson Award winners to come to the stage at this time. This award was established in 1981 to honor the late Kenneth Cuthbertson, one of the early architects of Stanford's long-range financial planning and development programs. The sole criterion of the Cuthbertson Award is the quality of the contribution that the recipient has made to Stanford. This is a fitting, lasting legacy to a man who cared deeply about the university and its values, and whose contributions continue to benefit each and every one of us today. The recipients of the 2012 Kenneth M. Cuthbertson Award for Exceptional Contribution to Stanford University are Sally M. Dixon, J.D., Associate Vice Provost for Student Affairs, Dean of Educational Resources, and Advisor to the President for Campus Life; John Pearson, Director of the Bechtel International Center. On behalf of the university, I congratulate each of you for this distinguished recognition of your exceptional service to Stanford.
It now gives me great pleasure to introduce this year's commencement speaker, Cory Booker, the mayor of Newark, New Jersey. Energetic, upbeat, inspirational, honest broker, determined to make a difference, ranked among the top 10 for the 2010 World Mayor Prize, a former Rhodes Scholar with Clintonian charisma, fearless, determined, committed. That's how the press has described Cory Booker. And he is all of that. But that leaves out the two most important things. Cory is a 2-degree Stanford alumnus and a former member of the Stanford Cardinal football team that held the axe for 4 years. Born in Washington, D.C., he grew up in a predominantly white suburb of New Jersey. His parents were among the first black executives at IBM. They instilled a sense of honor, a commitment to justice and opportunity, and a strong work ethic in their children. As an undergraduate at Stanford, he studied political science. Interested in helping urban youth even then, he volunteered at a student-run crisis hotline, reaching out to young people in East Palo Alto. After receiving his BA in 1991, he earned his second Stanford degree, an MA in sociology. Awarded a Rhodes Scholarship, he studied modern history at Oxford, where he received an honors degree in 1994. 3 years later, he earned his JD from the Yale Law School. In his second year at Yale, he moved to Newark. At the time, it was one of the poorest, most violent cities in the nation. But it was also a city with a glorious history. Booker has often described cities as, and I quote, the last frontier to make real the promise of America. And he believed that Newark was just such a city. In 1998, at the age of 29, he was elected to the Newark City Council, where he focused on cleaning up neighborhoods. Some of his methods were unorthodox. In one of the best-known examples, he went on a hunger strike and camped out in the middle of a drug-ridden housing project, an act that prompted dozens of neighbors to join him because they were concerned about his safety. And it worked. The Newark mayor, Sharp James, who had opposed earlier reform efforts, agreed to increase police patrols in the area. In 2002, Booker decided to take on City Hall literally. He ran for mayor against the 4-term incumbent. After losing in a campaign later chronicled in Street Fight, an Academy Award-nominated documentary, he withdrew from the public eye, but not from public service. He remained focused on transforming his city, and 4 years later, he ran for mayor again. In 2006, Cory Booker was elected the 36th mayor of Newark by a huge margin. Currently serving in his second term, he was worked with what one reporter called epic determination to reduce crime and create an urban environment that nurtures families and the economy. He has understood that a city cannot flourish unless families feel safe. He tackled crime prevention in a typically Booker way, hands-on. Against the advice of everyone, he patrolled the streets at night with his security team. He partnered with Newark businesses and raised millions of dollars to install more surveillance cameras. He hired a well-respected police chief who put more officers on the streets in evenings and weekends when crime was most rampant. Within 2 years, the murder rate dropped 36%. And on April 1st, 2010, Newark marked its first month in 44 years without a homicide. Under his leadership, the city has also added more affordable housing, increased the number of parks and green spaces, and attract millions in private philanthropy. After Booker expressed deep concern about low academic achievement, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg committed $100 million to help improve Newark schools. Despite a grueling schedule, he remains one of the nation's most accessible mayors, responding to personal appeals, holding regular office hours, and using social media to stay in touch. He has more than 1 million followers on Twitter. And a few years ago, when a constituent tweeted him directly that she was concerned about her 65-year-old father shoveling his driveway on New Year's Eve, Cory responded, "Please don't worry about your dad. I've got salt, shovels, and great volunteers." And yes, the mayor shoveled his driveway. Since his days as a big brother, Cory has been concerned about at-risk youth. When a couple of teenagers in Newark were arrested for spray painting graffiti, including the phrase, "Kill Booker," Cory decided to mentor them, taking them out for meals and arranging tutoring, but also setting standards for dress, behavior, and language. 2 months ago, on arriving home, he saw smoke coming from the building next door. He heard a woman scream that her daughter was trapped upstairs. His security detail tried to keep him back, but he said, "This woman is going to die if we don't help her." Help he did, running into the building and suffering second-degree burns and smoke inhalation, but saving that woman. Hours later, he was back online. Hours later, he was back online, tweeting reassurances to everyone concerned and praising his security officer for help. Newark fire officials characterized Cory's rescue as very heroic, but very dangerous. Indeed, Cory told Oprah Winfrey a few days later that he was terrified and thought at one moment that he might not make it. But that seems to me to characterize Cory's leadership. He has the courage to do the right thing, even when it is scary. And that courage, that conviction, has helped improve the lives of people in his community and beyond. He exemplifies the potential of every Stanford graduate to make a profound difference in our world. Please join me in warmly welcoming one of Stanford's own, Newark Mayor Cory Booker.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Last time I was on this field, some guy from UCLA tried to bury me right here. It's good to be back on top of the soil. I feel so lucky to be here. I really do. It's a feeling that Stanford has given me for all the years I've been involved with this amazing university. I know there are some people here that felt like me. After freshman orientation, you got back to your dorm, you closed the door, and sat on your couch and said, "Why did they let me into this place?" I began from that moment on when people got impressed that we're not from the Stanford community and said, "You went to Stanford?" And I said, "Yes." "Well, they let me in because of my 4.0 and 1600. and I said it was 4.0 yards per carry and 1,600 receiving yards my senior year in high school. Every step of my Stanford career, this university has given me immensely more than I have ever been able to give it. And I feel on this day, when we celebrate the class of 012, that we... Is this going to go on my whole speech, guys? I'll be very careful when I use that then. I feel that this university and this moment for me just fills me again with a sense of gratitude. For me in this great class, today is not just a day of celebration, but it is a day of appreciation. And allow me, with the class, to just give my thanks. First, thanks to the trustees of this university. I had a chance to serve with them for 5 years. It is one of the most incredible assemblages of human beings on the planet, and they pour their heart and their spirit into this university to protect its highest values and to ensure that it endures. Thank you, Board of Trustees. I want to thank the faculty and staff. I have never, ever in my life seen folks that have not just mastered their discipline, not just mastered their academic endeavor, but showed to me and other students a level of love, caring, involvement, and spirit that sustains me to this day. My connection to faculty members here at this university has not been severed just by leaving here. Indeed, it's a faculty member every time I've gotten inaugurated as an elected official. It was always my family there, and even a Stanford faculty member, Jody Maxman, who joins me on that stage. Please thank all of the faculty members as well for all that they've done. And I want to thank another group that I probably did not say thank you to enough. A group that is often first forgotten. Those are the people that really keep this university running. They are the secretaries and the assistants. They are the people that mow the lawns and water the grass. They're the people that clean toilets and bathrooms and windows. They are a part of the Stanford community, and their caring and concern has made this day possible as well. Please thank them. And finally, I want to thank the families. You are the ones that really made this day possible. Each and every graduate has someone tied to them by blood and or spirit who was there for them, who planted seeds in their spirit, who nurtured the ground on which they grew. You are responsible for them being here, and while they were here, you sent care packages, made phone calls, sent money. And that's perhaps what I want to talk about today. Family, not the money part. All us politicians are focused on more than just that. The family. Today is Father's Day, and I thought I would focus really on two men in my life. I am one of those guys that knows in my heart that women in this globe, philanthropists are finding this out. So many people are seeing that if you support women, that you will help change neighborhoods, change cities, change countries. And from a man who is part of the African American tradition, which is rich with matriarchal power and strength, please do not think that while focusing on men today that I do not understand that truth. But today, for a very specific reason, I want to focus on two men in my life who were at my graduation. And I know they would like to be here today, but for reasons I'll mention later, they could not make the trip. These two men are my dad and my grandfather. They taught me what it means to be a man. And they both are these outrageous spirits with the corniest jokes imaginable, and they would show up to my graduation, and both of them would be like a stereophonic bad joke-telling machine. As they would weigh into me, my grandfather, this huge, big man, would saddle up to me and say, "You see, boy, the tassel is worth the hassle." Yes, Granddad, yes. And then, of course, he would look through the program and say, I see that you're not magna cum laude or summa cum laude. You're just thank you, Lottie, I'm out of here. My father would not be undone. He too was at every one of my graduations, and his jokes got more painful as the years went on. He and my mom would love to say, they'd look at me and they would whisper to another parent and they would take the line and say, you know, behind every successful child is an astonished parent. I really can't believe this. Unbelievable. My father got tired of graduations after a while. He's a guy that went to college and then went to work, and he saw me graduate from Stanford once, graduate from Stanford twice, then go to England and study and get another degree, then go to law school, and finally he said at my last graduation, boy, you got more degrees in the month of July, and you ain't hot. Get a job. I want to pick up on these two incredibly corny men and really get to their two specific lessons that they imparted to me on graduation. My dad would touch me almost like he was trying to feel my very spirit. He would look at me and he would say in ways that are eloquent, he would impart to me this truth. He would say to me, boy, you need to understand that who you are now, you are the physical manifestation of a conspiracy of love. The people whose names you don't even know, who struggled for you, who fought for you, who sweat for you, who volunteered for you, you are here because of them. Do not forget that. My father said those words on a graduation day, and he knew that I would not forget that, because this was his consistent theme to me all of my life. He wanted me to know where I came from. Now, my father, in his own charismatic way, would always talk about his own journey being one that was a result of a conspiracy of love. And I listened to those stories year after year. By the time I was 40, I would start arguing with him because the scenes would get so much more dramatic with time and change. And I'd be like, Dad, I can't believe this. You were born a poor boy. He goes, poor? I wasn't poor. Shut up, man. I said, Dad. He goes, no, I wasn't poor. I was just P.O. I couldn't afford the other two letters. Don't exaggerate my material well-being, son. I'd have to argue with him and try to convince him that he was not telling the full truth when the weather patterns began to shift over the years from, raining in the mountains of North Carolina. Then the thunderstorm started. Then the hail period began, where it went from hail the size of golf balls, then footballs, then soccer balls, then small Cadillacs. This last year, I argued with him because he tried to tell me, and I couldn't accept it. I had to be respectful of my dad, but I could not accept it. There's no way, Dad. You were in the mountains of North Carolina. You could not have had a tsunami in your childhood. But as much as my dad seemed to exaggerate aspects of his childhood over the years, the truth is he was born very poor. He was born to a single mother who could not take care of him. He then was raised by his grandparents, like many children in my community, but then his grandma could not take care of him. And then he was out in the community, but it was that conspiracy of love, people whose names I do not know, in a small, segregated North Carolina town that rallied around this boy, would not let him fail, got him to school, put a roof over his head, put food on the table, taught him discipline and respect, and he made his way. And then when it was time for him to graduate high school, he was not going to go to college. He thought his destiny was to go to work, get a job, but it was that conspiracy of love that would not let him turn his back on higher education. I couldn't believe it this last Thanksgiving as my family was going around talking about what we were thankful for. Here is my father that begins to cry because he could not remember all of those people in the town. He could not say their names who put dollar bills in envelopes so that he could afford his first semester's tuition at North Carolina Central University and then get a job and stay in school. But they are a part of that conspiracy of love. And then in college, my mom and dad would not let me forget the truth of that time. It was the early 60s, and I had this privilege last year of being the commencement speaker from my mom's university, Fisk University, on her 50th reunion, and she reminded me about what happened at her university. At the night before dinner, she took me around to table after table, stopping and saying, "Cory, this is the young lady that led our voter registration movement at a time that it was dangerous in the South to go out and register people to vote." You all remember Goodwin and Cheney and Schwerner. She would take me to another table and say, "This is the young lady that led our boycott of the downtown store that would not serve African Americans." At every table, it was almost like she was talking to me again as a boy, snapping her fingers and saying, "Pay attention. This person marched for you. This person protested for you. This person sacrificed and risked expulsion for you." The conspiracy continued. My parents would tell me about landing in Washington, D.C. That's where they met. 2 college graduates, African Americans, that confronted the reality that many companies would not hire blacks. But it was this conspiracy of love. Black folks and white folks and Latinos in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere in America that were forming organizations that were challenging companies and working with them to hire blacks. My dad soon became one of the first blacks hired by an oil company, then one of the first black professionals hired by a department store. Then he and my mom became a part of a wave of the first blacks hired from this small tech startup that you all out here in Silicon Valley may not have heard of called IBM. The conspiracy continued. When my parents got promotions after doing so well at IBM, they got moved to the New York City area. They were looking for towns to move into and immediately found out that many of the nicest towns with the best schools would not show the homes to black families. And so my parents worked with this group of conspirators who formed something called the Fair Housing Council. And every time my parents would go look at a house and were told it was sold, they would send a white couple there to see if that was the truth. I was told that white couple's name was Mr. and Mrs. Brown, but they were not brown. My parents fell in love with a home. They were told it was sold. The Browns were there next, told it was still for sale. They put a bid on the house. On the day of the closing, my father went, instead of the Browns, with a young lawyer whose name I don't know, walked into the real estate agent's office and said, "You are in violation of New Jersey fair housing law." And before he could finish his speech, this young lawyer, bright and ready to confront injustice, the real estate agent stands up and punches the lawyer in the face. He sigs a dog on my dad. Now, the size of the dog has changed over the years. My father now insists it was spawn from hell. It was Cujo. My mom will whisper to me, "It was just Toto, Cory. It was really a small thing." And so there I was, 1970, baby growing up in this town, my father and my mother, my brother and me, as my father referred to us, 4 raisins in a tub of vanilla ice cream. And in this amazing town, in this nurturing community, I grew strong and had my share of success. I was a high school All-American football player. I was in the Honor Society, president of my class. But if my parents saw me getting too big for my britches, if they saw me looking proud, my father would be right there. He would say to me, "Boy, don't you dare walk around this house like you hit a triple when you were born on third base." He would say to me, "You need to understand something. You drink deeply from wells of freedom and liberty and opportunity that you did not dig. You eat lavishly from banquet tables prepared for you by your ancestors. You sit under the shade of trees that you did not plant or cultivate or care for. You have a choice in life. You can just sit back, getting fat, dumb, and happy, consuming all of the blessings put before you, or it could metabolize inside of you, become fuel to get you into the fight, to make this democracy real, to make it true to its words, that we can be a nation of liberty and justice for all." And so, in answer to my father's call, when I had exhausted most of the degrees available to any bright student. I moved to Newark, New Jersey. And I tell you, it was not some great altruism. I was looking to be the man that my father raised me to be. I was in search of myself, and I found a community of heroes that embraced me and brought me back full circle to family. When I first arrived in Newark, I decided to answer that call from that great American philosopher, Chris Rock, who said, "Why is it the most violent street in every city is named for the man that stood for nonviolence?" Newark had so many strong neighborhoods, but I sought out one that was in struggle and found it on Martin Luther King Boulevard. It looked spectacularly troublesome to me. My eyes saw abandoned homes being used for drugs. My eyes saw violence. My eyes saw graffiti. But the first person I met, the tenant leader in the high-rise projects that I would eventually move into, Ms. Jones, she said to me, "Tell me again what you see. Describe what you see around you." And I described what I saw. And she looks at me and she says, "Boy, if that's all you see, you can never help me." And I go, "What do you mean?" And she goes, "You need to understand something, that the world you see outside of you is a reflection of what you have inside of you. And if you see only problems and darkness and despair, that's all there's ever going to be. But if you're one of those stubborn people who every time you open your eyes, you see hope, opportunity, possibility, love, even the face of God, then you can help me make a change." And I remember after she said that, looking at her, scratching my head and thinking to myself, "Okay, grasshopper, that ended the lesson." I worked with this woman, this tenant leader, and I would sit at her kitchen table and watch these other African-American women sit around that table in these projects being run by a slumlord. And they would sit there and strategize about how to take care of the kids in the community, how to keep a family in their housing when they've missed a rental payment. I stood there and I watched them thinking about how to support that community, and I found it. I found conspirators. I found people coming together, and they weren't just in those projects. All over Newark, I saw more and more people who had a courage, who had a spirit, who had a love. And so for my father's sake, I want to explain to you the three things that these conspirators all had in common. One was they embraced discomfort. They did not seek comfort and convenience. They went to where the challenges were. Here were people around me in Newark doing extraordinary things outside of their comfort zone. Like the man who was a retired state worker that got his stimulus check in the mail, and instead of just spending it on himself, he went out and got a lawnmower, marched into one of our troubled drug lots. There was this big grassy overgrown field with trash and debris, and he started cleaning it. He made it look like the White House lawn, never confronting a drug dealer, but eventually they left. Like the woman who came to me in my office hours, an 80-year-old woman complaining to me about how dirty her street was, and the next day I go out there, and here's this 80-year-old woman outside of her comfort zone, on that street, sweeping the entire block, showing that he who has a heart to help definitely does have a right to complain. It's about the guy I know who was driving to work in Newark and didn't like the graffiti. And instead of just driving by it and accepting what was, like so many of us who just fall into a state of sedentary agitation, when we're upset about what's going on, but we don't get up and do something about it. He stopped at a store and began making a routine out of his commute to work where he would stop and take paint and paint over graffiti. In my city, I see that conspirators know do not go through life comfortable. Democracy is not a spectator sport. It is a difficult, hard, challenging, full contact, competitive, participatory endeavor. And this is critical. People who get comfortable of body get fat. People who get comfortable of mind and intellect get dull. People who get comfortable in their spirit, they miss what they were created for. They were created to magnify the glory of the world, not simply reduce in size and fail to reflect that spirit. I've come to learn in my life to embrace discomfort because it's a precondition to service. I've come to realize to embrace fears because if you can move through fear, you find out that fear is a precondition to discovery. I've learned in my life to embrace frustration because when you get really frustrated, that is a precondition to incredible breakthroughs. Now, the second thing I've seen amongst conspirators is this idea of faithfulness. Mother Teresa was once asked how she judged success. And she said, God didn't call me to be successful, He called me to be faithful. I didn't need to read Mother Teresa, I just simply needed to look at people in my community in Newark. Miss Virginia Jones, that tenant leader, was once telling me a story when I was peppering her with questions about her life. I had lived with her now in those buildings for years, and I never knew that she had a son. She told me about one day somebody knocked on her door. She opened her door, and there was this woman crying who could not speak. She dragged her down to the lobby, and there on the lobby floor was her son, a veteran, who had come back to visit her. There he was on the lobby floor with 3 gunshots, bleeding that lobby floor red. She sat there and she was telling me the story that she fell to her knees, crying in her dead son's chest. And when she finished telling me the story, I looked at her and I said, Miss Jones, I'm sorry, but why do you still live in these buildings where your son was murdered, walking through that lobby every day? And she looked at me almost like she was insulted by the question, but I knew that she and I were 2 people that paid market rent to live in this housing. She had choices of where to go, and she looks at me and she says, why do I still live here? And I said, yes. She goes, why do I live in apartment 5A still? And I said, yes. She goes, why am I still the tenant president for over 40 years? And I said, that's electoral longevity. I want you to tell me about that. But yes, why? And she crossed her arms looking at me and she said, because I'm in charge of Homeland Security. Here is a woman that remained faithful. And I want to tell you, graduates, of all the lessons of conspirators, this is the hardest one for me personally. To stay faithful in a world that can be so cruel. To stay faithful in a world that justifiably emotes cynicism. I have seen things in my life that have broken me of spirit, have ground me down to the floor. In 2004, in April, I was walking through one of the neighborhoods of my city and I heard gunshots going off. It sounded like cannon fire between the buildings. I raced towards where the gunshots were fired and I saw kids screaming and yelling. I saw one boy falling backwards off of some steps. I went to catch him and I caught him and I looked over his shoulder and I saw the white t-shirt he was wearing filling up with red blood. I laid him down and put my hand on his chest trying to stop the bleeding, but the blood was coming everywhere. I screamed at someone to tell me his name, and they did, and yelled at people to call the ambulance, and I said, screaming his name, don't leave us, don't leave us. Foamy blood was pouring from his mouth. It was one of the most gruesome things as I sat there trying to stop the blood, but he kept bleeding, and he died right there in front of me. The ambulance came and pushed me away, opened his chest, and I saw the number of bullet holes in him, and I tell you, it was over. I was broken. I was done. I went back to my apartment and tried to scrub the blood of this boy off my hands, but I felt my heart fill up with anger and blackness. All I could think is, what kind of world do we live in? Where everybody I know knows who JonBenet Ramsey is or Natalie Holloway, but few people I know can name the name of one black child killed in my city today. What is going on with this world? That we seem to value life so little that dozens of kids, of boys, of men are murdered every week. I wanted to give up. I was done. And then I left my apartment and walked out to the courtyard and I saw the back of Miss Jones' head. She turned around and she saw my expression. She said, come give me a hug. And I hugged this woman and I wept in her arms. she held me, and all she said is, stay faithful, stay faithful, stay faithful. I'm telling you right now, courage does not always roar. It's not when you stand up and beat your chest and you're ready for the big game, the big fight, the big speech. That is not real courage in my book anymore. It's not running into a burning building. Real courage is that when life has beaten you down so low, when you are broken, when you have wounds that you wonder if they can ever heal. Courage is when you've done something wrong and you feel the weight of shame on your chest so heavy that you can barely breathe. Courage is when you're curled up on a ball in your bed, sleepless throughout the night, and when the sun comes up, courage isn't the roar. Courage is that small voice in your mind that says, get up, get out of bed, put your feet on the floor, brush your teeth, wash your face, comb your hair, God, if you have it. Put your hand on that doorknob and go outside for another day of loving and stand with all of your might and look up into the heavens. And courage has you say in a defiant spirit, you can take everything from me. You could cut me deep. You could render me in shame, but you will never, ever stop me from loving those who mock me, from loving those who hate me, for loving those who don't forgive me, for loving the cynics, for loving the darkness so much that I myself, through my small acts of consistent, unyielding love, will bring on the light. And this brings me to the final point of conspirators that my dad and my community have shown me, is that conspirators are the ones that show up. They just show up. And what do I mean by that? I mean that we go through life all the time, but we don't always show up. We may be there in body, but we're not there in spirit. And we begin to erode the truth of who we are. We fail to live our authenticity. A great President Lincoln said that everyone is born an original, but sadly, most die copies because they don't show up. I've learned that what you think about the world says less about the world than it does about you. And when you show up in this world and have the courage to tell your truth in moments big, but more importantly, in moments small, then you are the architect not only of your own destiny, but you're the architect of transformational change. Showing up. Forgive me, I've got just a bad story about that, but I was on my way to Stanford as a freshman, coming back to the farm. And here I got on a plane and it was packed with people, but somehow God shined his grace upon me, because as they closed the door to the plane, there was 2 seats open next to me, and I thought to myself, look at all these other people. It's such a shame that they have to deal with all that cramped space, but I have this whole seat. God obviously loves me more than them. Well, just as I was sitting there so satisfied, the door to the plane opens, and all of us shot to attention because it sounded like some beast was coming in. Some screams were happening. We couldn't understand what was going on outside of the plane. And then we understood, because the beast came onto the plane, and it had 3 heads. It was a woman and a little boy and a baby. Immediately, everybody on that plane looked at them and then slowly turned their heads to me. And I could see everyone was thinking, you smug little man. And that woman and her 2 children came to stand before me and said, I'm sitting there. And I said, are you sure? And they moved in and they sat down, and immediately, as a 19-year-old man, I suddenly had an evolved thought that I could accept this now as being the worst flight of my life, or I can make it different. Because in life, you get one choice over and over again. That is to accept conditions as they are, or to take responsibility for changing them. To yield to the circumstances around you, or to show up and do something about them. I decided that I was going to make this the best flight of my life. I started telling this little boy jokes, and he started laughing at my horrible jokes, like my grandfather would love. Like, why did Tigger and Eeyore have their heads in the toilet? Because they were looking for poo. Like, why? What do you call your mother's sister who runs away and gets married? An antelope. I'm sorry, I had to try. By the time we landed, we were all having a ball. The woman who came on the plane, embarrassed, suddenly felt like she was lifted. We exchanged addresses as I was getting ready to come down here to the farm, and we never kept in touch. But 5 years passed, 10 years passed, 15 years passed, and I was running for mayor of Newark. On my most discouraged day in that campaign, I got a letter from this woman saying, "You don't remember me, but I met you on a flight to Stanford 15 years ago, and I will never forget your kindness then." She said to me, "Not only do I remember your kindness, but we're actually here in Newark. We own a factory here." Her son became a great volunteer on my campaign. They got me involved with their company, and she ended up being something that all politicians love, a campaign contributor. Show up. And now the second man, my grandfather, who was with my father in spirit, it's one simple thing that he would say to me at graduations. He would say to me, "Boy, understand that you have a role in this world, and that's to get along with others, to join your spirit with them." I tell you, this is one that I struggle with. You see, conspirators need to embody those things I mentioned before, but they also need to join together. My grandfather, this amazing man, his life was all about the joining together of disparate elements of our society. He was born also to a single mother, but he was born in a difficult circumstance because he was born with red hair and much lighter skin than his siblings. It was obvious that he was born to a white man at a time that it was illegal for blacks and whites to marry. He grew up feeling that he had inside of his spirit so many different parts of his country. He ended up becoming a person that did everything he could to unite people. He was a union organizer, bringing people together for justice. He was a Democratic activist working within the party to support FDR. He was an entrepreneur, bringing people together for business endeavor. And he wanted his children and then his grandchildren to understand that what makes this country great is how united it is. He used to load us onto an RV and drive us around the country to show us how great this nation is. He would tell us history of our country, even if he didn't know it. We would ask him questions when we were driving through Arizona. "Granddad, why do they call this town Yuma, Arizona?" And he would say, "Well, let me see. That's because when this town was founding, there was a gunfight, and one guy shot the other, and he grabbed his heart and said, 'Yuma,' and then died." I talk to my grandfather all the time about this country. He tells me that, "Son, this country we forget. We talk always about the Declaration of Independence, but really this nation was founded on a declaration of interdependence, this recognition that we need each other." When I talk to my grandfather now, I anguish to him that we are a nation that has become so polarized, where people are so quick to identify themselves as Democrat or Republican before they say first and foremost that I am an American. They're so focused on left and right that they forget that this nation must go forward. I anguish to my granddad when I talk to him now, how can we have come so far as a nation that the word compromise is a curse? And the word patriotism is not used to unite us all, but it's used to demean others and to esteem yourself like I am the true patriot, and because of you and what you believe, you're not. This is not the America that my grandfather believes in. He said we were formed to come together and make a more perfect union. And to me, this is what I've found in my work, that the change we make really comes about when we come together across party lines, come together across religious lines and racial lines. When President Hennessy introduced me, he talked about a hunger strike. The great feeling that I got from that experience was how the city came together to deal with a problem, and that's what we need in America today. My grandfather would love that every nation that makes up this nation, every heritage has this ideal of unity. It's like the old African saying that says, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. It's like another saying that he loved that said, when spider webs unite, they could tie up a lion. It's like what Golda Meir said, that when Jews come together, they're strong, but with Jews with other people are invincible. It's like the Islamic faith, that one of the pillars of Islam is that word tawheed, which means we all share one God, one spirit, one soul. It's like this wonderful man in a jail cell in Birmingham who wrote the truth of our nation in 1963 when he said we were all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a common garment of destiny, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And when I stand in a conspiracy in Newark, I feel that connection to conspirators who understood this truth of coming together, like those people who came together, scientists and engineers that turned the moon from a dream into a destiny, like those conspirators on the Underground Railroad, black and white, who came together saying that we must overcome this slavery, like the conspirators who took us as a nation from child labor to public education, from sweatshops to workers' rights. They were all conspirators who came together to exalt our highest ideals, to celebrate our common aspirations, to live the truth of our founding, which is that this nation is nothing if it stands apart, but everything if it stands together. That ultimately we must live our hallmark, those three words from a dead language, e pluribus unum. And so, graduates, I tell you today this from my heart, and it pains me to tell you that my grandfather and my father, who would have so wanted to be here today, to pillar you all with their corny jokes, to tell you that the tassel is worth the hassle, the two men are not here today. My father is not here because he's at home in Atlanta. I talked to him this morning. He is struggling with Parkinson's in the latter stages of that disease. Oh, what 20 years have brought from my father, the man that was running after me on football fields, to now a man who this terrible disease is stripping of his physical mobility, stripping him of his mental faculties. But when I am with him, I see that this disease can take everything from him. It can make him not even recognize me when I sit before him, but I still see in this man his spirit, his kindness, and his love. I see within him the manifestation physically of so many conspirators. My grandfather is not here today either. My grandfather also had his struggles with a terrible disease. Cancer kept coming at him again and again, and my grandfather, with his spirit and his humor, kept beating it back time and time again. I'll never forget, once I was visiting him as he was struggling with cancer. I said, "How you doing, Granddad?" He says, "I'm doing fine." I go, "Why?" And he pulled out one of the pills he was taken by his doctor, and he said, in his best quote from one of his favorite films, he lifted it up to me and said, "Say hello to my little friend." The last time I talked to my grandfather, his big body was now shriveled and weak from radiation, from the sickness. And the last thing he said to me before I left him was, "I love you, son. I love you. I love your children, and I love your children's children." I left him confused. I'm not married. I have no kids. I thought he was just delirious. But as I struggled to make sense of his words, I got a cruel phone call that explained them to me. It was almost 10 years ago to the month that I got that cruel phone call. I was in the midst of a campaign for mayor, and I was on Spruce Street in Newark. And there was a family member of mine that said, "Your grandfather is dead." And I remember not doing what they told me to do. Call my grandmother, they said, but I couldn't. I just pulled over to the side of the road and I wept at the loss of my hero. And then suddenly, in the midst of my tears, I remembered his final words. He said, I love you, and I love your children, and I love your children's children, and it made sense to me. One of my friends who's an astrophysicist told me that the stars we see at night, millions and millions of light years away, some of them could be gone already, but the light and the energy that gave off, you can still see it today. Well, that was my grandfather. He loved so much that his love will affect generations yet unborn. He loved so much that he may be gone for a decade from me, but I still feel him today in every cool wind that breathes in my face, and every deep breath I take. His love is with me, and I hope you feel it today. And thus I say to you on this graduation, I say to you in the name of my father, Carrie Alfred Booker, I say to you in the name of my grandfather, Limery Jordan, to join the conspiracy, to be a class of people that rejects cynicism, that is not joining the ranks of the denizens of divisiveness or the nattering nabobs of negativity, but be lovers. Join the conspiracy and love with all of your heart and all of your courage. Let your love be defiant. Let your love be rebellious. Join the conspiracy and make change in your life, because change will not roll in on the wheels of inevitability. It must be carried in on the backs of lovers. Class of 012, I say, stand up and be lovers of life. Be present. Take the more difficult road and love in a way that you can make true the words of children being said in Newark almost every day, that you can be responsible, that making for this world and our nation true of the fact that we are one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. God bless you, 012.
Thank you, Mayor Booker. And thank you for reminding us what a difference one courageous and determined individual can make in our world. I'd like to ask the provost to come forward to present the candidates for degrees.
Mr. President, first I have the honor to recognize all those who have completed the requirements for master's and doctoral degrees. They will be presented to you by the deans of their schools.
Will the candidates from the School of Engineering please stand? Mr. President, I present to you those who have completed the requirements for the degrees of Master of Science, Engineer, and Doctor of Philosophy.
By the authority vested in me by the faculty and trustees of this university, I am happy to confer publicly upon you the degrees for which you have been presented and admit you to their rights, responsibilities, and privileges. Congratulations.
Will the graduates from the School of Engineering please be seated?
Will the candidates from the School of Law please stand? Mr. President, I present to you those who have completed the requirements for the degrees of Doctor of Jurisprudence, Master of the Science of Law, Doctor of the Science of Law, and Master of Laws.
Thank you, Dean Kramer, and may I also thank you for your 8 years of remarkable service as Dean of our law school. By the authority vested in me by the faculty and trustees of this university, I am happy to confer publicly upon you the degrees for which you have been presented and to admit you to their rights, responsibilities, and privileges. Congratulations.
Will the graduates from the School of Law please be seated?
Will the graduates from the School of Education please stand? Mr. President, I present to you those who have completed the requirements for the degrees of Master of Arts in Teaching, Doctor of Education, and Doctor of Philosophy.
Thank you, Dean Steele, and may I welcome you back to Stanford and to your new role as the Dean of our School of Education.
Thank you.
By the authority vested in me by the faculty and trustees of this university, I am happy to confer publicly upon you the degrees for which you have been presented and to admit you to their rights, responsibilities, and privileges. Congratulations.
Will the graduates from the School of Education please be seated?
Will the candidates from the School of Humanities and Sciences please stand? Mr. President, I present to you those who have completed the requirements for the degrees of Master of Arts, Master of Liberal Arts, Master of Science, Master of Fine Arts, Doctor of Musical Arts, and Doctor of Philosophy.
Thank you, Dean Saller. By the authority vested in me by the faculty and trustees of this university, I am happy to confer publicly upon you the degrees for which you have been presented and to admit you to their rights, responsibilities, and privileges. Congratulations.
Will the graduates from the School of Humanities and Sciences please be seated?
Will the candidates from the School of Earth Sciences please stand? Mr. President, I present to you those who have completed the requirements for the degrees of Master of Science, Engineer, and Doctor of Philosophy.
Thank you, Dean Mattson. By the authority vested in me by the faculty and trustees of this university, I am happy to confer publicly upon you the degrees for which you have been presented and to admit you to their rights, responsibilities, and privileges. Congratulations.
Will the graduates from the School of Earth Sciences please be seated?
Will the candidates from the Graduate School of Business please stand? Mr. President, I present to you those who have completed the requirements for the degrees of Master of Arts in Business Research, Master of Science in Management, Master of Business Administration, and Doctor of Philosophy.
Thank you, Dean Saloner. By the authority vested in me by the faculty and trustees of this university, I am happy to confer publicly upon you the degrees for which you have been presented and to admit you to their rights, responsibilities, and privileges. Congratulations.
Will the graduates from the School of Business please be seated?
Will the candidates from the School of Medicine please stand? Mr. President, I present to you those who've completed the requirements for the degrees of Master of Science, Doctor of Medicine, and Doctor of Philosophy.
Thank you, Dean Pizzo. By the authority vested in me by the faculty and trustees of this university, I am happy to confer publicly upon you the degrees for which you have been presented and to admit you to their rights, responsibilities, and privileges. Congratulations.
Will the graduates from the School of Medicine please be seated?
Well, Mr. Provost, have we forgotten anyone?
I think we're done. Oh, no. Now, Mr. President, I have the honor to recognize all those who have completed the requirements for undergraduate degrees. Will the recipients of the degrees of Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science, and Bachelor of Arts and Sciences please stand? Oh, 12. Mr. President, I present to you those who have completed the requirements for Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science degrees and the Bachelor of Arts and Science degree.
Thank you, Provost Etchemendy. By the authority vested in me by the faculty and trustees of this university, I am happy to confer publicly upon you the degrees for which you have been presented and admit you to their rights, responsibilities, and privileges. Congratulations, 012!
Will the graduates please be seated?
Graduates of Stanford University, on behalf of all members of the Stanford family, I congratulate you and commend you. You have made many contributions to our community of scholars through your time at Stanford, and you have our deep thanks. Before we close, I'd like to reflect for a few minutes on a phrase you heard several times today. As each group of graduates was presented, I responded by admitting them to their rights, responsibilities, and privileges associated with the degree from Stanford University. We believe a Stanford education brings a responsibility to make good use of your knowledge, to make the world a better place, and to help ensure that succeeding generations have the same kinds of opportunities that you have had here at Stanford. Today, you join a long line of distinguished alumni who, like Mayor Cory Booker, put their education to good use. I have made it a commencement tradition to talk about a member of the Stanford family who took his or her responsibilities to future generations seriously. This year, I want to talk about someone who had a profound and lasting impact on this university, the late Richard Wall Lyman, Stanford's 7th president. His death last month was a tremendous loss for our community. He was a man of great strength and integrity, and it was a privilege to know him. I doubt that many of our graduates are aware of Professor Lyman and his history at Stanford. He was president when I joined in 1977. 23 years later, he spoke at my inauguration, noting with characteristic directness, "Clearly," he said, "it is not all that hard to succeed to a university presidency. It happens all the time. What is not easy, as all who have held the position know, is to succeed in one." But by any measure, Dick Lyman succeeded. And he succeeded in the face of extraordinary challenges, guiding Stanford through some of the most difficult years in its recent history. Born in Philadelphia and raised in New Haven, Connecticut, he attended Swarthmore College, but his undergraduate studies were interrupted when he was drafted for service in World War II. When he returned to finish his degree, he met Elizabeth Schaffler, widely known as Jing. They married the summer after their graduation and headed for Harvard, where Dick earned his master's and doctoral degrees. In 1958, Dick and Jing and their 4 children arrived at Stanford. Throughout their time, Jing was an active and involved partner, supporting Dick, appearing at innumerable Stanford events, but also pursuing her own interests in areas such as gender equality and fair housing. When they arrived, the university was perceived as a quiet regional school, but that would change dramatically over the next 2 decades. Dick Lyman was a great teacher. Even his 8 a.m. classes were highly rated by students. But he was also a strong and effective leader. In 1964, he became Associate Dean of the School of Humanities and Sciences, and 3 years later, he was Provost, serving 2 presidents, Wallace Stirling and Kenneth Pitzer. In 1970, he became Stanford's 7th president. The late 1960s and 1970s were a time of great unrest for the nation and for its universities. Students participated in civil rights movement and anti-war protests. They questioned everything, from the university's admissions policies to its governance. It was a turbulent period when protests could suddenly erupt into violence. And as if that were not enough, the university also found itself in difficult financial straits. Dick Lyman guided Stanford through that turbulence, through protests, fires, bombings, various shutdowns, and difficult financial challenges. And under his leadership, the university did more than survive. It flourished. In 1969, as provost, he was faced with a particularly difficult decision. Students had occupied the main administration building and invaded the offices and could not be persuaded to leave. Although he was personally deeply opposed to the Vietnam War and was a passionate advocate for free speech, he believed the disruption and potential for violence were a serious threat to the university. So he made the decision to call the police to campus for the first time in the university's history. But he also worked with the sheriff's office to ensure that faculty advisors could be on hand anytime the police had to clear a building. That policy protected both the police and the students and kept the volatile situation from escalating further. The year before, after Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, members of the Black Student Union called for the university to increase minority representation in the faculty and student body. It was a cause Lyman deeply believed in. Years later, he wrote, "We were doing our best to set an institution for which we cared deeply on the road to diversity after so many decades of injustice and exclusion." By the end of his term, the enrollment of Black, Native American, and Hispanic students had increased significantly. The university also opened its first coeducational dormitory on campus during Dick Lyman's years. As Dick Lyman explained to the Stanford Report, students in Stanford's overseas campus were already sharing a dorm. And if we can have a co-ed dorm in Florence, Italy, why not a co-ed dorm in Florence more? Leadership, he wrote years later, requires different qualities at differing times. As an historian and educator, he understood the necessity of changing with the times. Throughout social upheaval and changes in governance, Dick Lyman never lost sight of the university's mission or the importance of open dialogue. In an address after having summoned the police, he said, "Anytime it becomes necessary for a university to summon the police, a defeat has taken place. The victory we seek at Stanford is not like a military victory. It is a victory of reason and the examined life over unreason and the tyranny of coercion." His leadership and ability to guide Stanford through this difficult time ensured that the university could focus on academic excellence, and its reputation and prominence increased significantly. When I arrived as a faculty member in 1977, Stanford was focused on its core mission. As a young assistant professor, I did not know what the president was doing or about the tumultuous times that had only recently ended. But I knew that Stanford was a great university and a wonderful place to be teaching and doing research. Dick Lyman had done much to ensure that. In 1991, Dick and Jing Lyman jointly received the degrees of Uncommon Man and Uncommon Woman, Stanford's highest honor for exceptional service to the university, a recognition that has been given to only 25 people in the past 58 years. Throughout his years of courageous leadership and dedicated service, Dick Lyman exemplified the Stanford spirit, and all of you have benefited from his leadership and his dedication to this university. Today, I hope you leave this campus with a strong reservoir of the Stanford spirit, a reservoir that will grow over the years. And I hope this spirit inspires you to make your own contributions to the world, and that it brings you back often to this great and much-loved university. Congratulations, and thank you.
I invite you to stand as you're able for the benediction. Beloved graduates of the class of 012, proud family, mentors, and friends, we bless these moments and these years for all that we have learned, for all we have loved and lost, and for the quiet ways they have brought us nearer to both visible and invisible destinations. Learners and leaders, these long-awaited endeavors completed today teach us to consider those whose very lives depend upon the quality of our work, the generosity of our lives, and the preservation of our common world and the common good. Trust and treasure the possibilities of a generous heart and a compassionate life. May you have the grace to act kindly, to be gentle, to be at home with yourselves and others. May you know the wisdom of deep listening, the healing of wholesome words. May you learn to cultivate the art of presence in order to engage with everyone you meet. May you be willing to continually work on yourself, building up and refining the ways of your heart, your soul, and your mind. May you have good friends to nourish you and to mirror your blind spots. Go now in peace, love mercy, walk humbly, laugh early and often, act justly, speak honestly, find the right questions to ask, give more than you have received. It will be hard, but you can do it. Each beginning demands an ending. Every ending promises a beginning. Now is such a time. May God bless you and keep you, grant you wisdom and courage, fill you with joy, love, 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 and peace, now and in the days to come. Amen.